Dear friends, my name is Alexander Grek. I'm chief editor of the journal Popular Mechanics. And I will moderate our great session. So the future of the city transport systems. We'll have several presentations of experts representing different areas. Could you please take your seats? We don't have much time, but we've got to be with the agenda, and that is why please don't speak longer than 10 minutes. Let me first and foremost introduce our speakers. Maxim Sutov, Chief of the Moscow Department of Transport, will open our session. After Maxim, we'll have a very interesting presentation by Chris Vasquez, Director of Product Development of Hyperloop One. Eric Drume, futurist, digital philosopher, here he is. And then Anthony Townsend, Director for Technological Development, Institute for the Future, will join us later. And also we have in first line expert Dmitry Slesser, who is in charge of department on work of clients, VTB Bank. And now I'd like to give the floor to Maxim Liksutov. And Maxim, could you share your vision of the Moscow's transport system with us? Thank you, dear friends, dear colleagues. I think this is a very interesting topic, and I will speak today about the future of the transport systems of our city. Not long ago, we had a session on transport development in different big cities. And there, rector of one of our top universities was speaking there and said that today we are in for a huge step forward in energy sources or energy transformation. And I think that very often there will be a breakout of the information and technology. This will cover, as he says, all the spheres of our life, including transport. And transport will benefit probably the most from it. Because in recent years, we didn't have a lot of dramatic, developed technologies. So we're waiting for something great. What do I mean saying something great? Electrobus, electrical bus, for instance. Our colleague, Hyperloop, will tell us about this product. Today it's only a pilot product, so we're in for it. And in December we'll see how it is going to work, not in theory, but in practice. Automatic metro, underground. This system was started and tested quite long ago. And we have the experience of our French and Chinese colleagues, but unfortunately the experience is not applicable to Moscow, not because of money, but because of the effect and some specific features. But still, we're in for something great in energy, in transport, in digital technologies too. We have now mobile applications. This is already progress, and Moscow is here one of the leaders in the world. Many of you maybe do not like private parking places, but still here we are leaders. We are leaders because a lot of payments go through these mobile applications for private parking places. So it is a breakthrough too. So we started paying cash. In different cities, they still do like this. But in Moscow, our position was to get through this point and to organize the system working automatically. So here you can see the evolution of the transport system in Moscow. I wouldn't say it is unique, but it is more or less similar for the majority of the world cities. Everyone would start with a horse, and then they changed to electrical transport. Then underground appeared. Parallelly, railways and rail transport was developing. Intellectual systems managing the transport emerged in the Russian Federation quite long ago. Maybe in those times the system was innovative and adaptive, but the traffic lights were pre-programmed still. So what we witnessed, there was different regiments and the traffic lights work differently at the weekend and every day in the evening. Actually, in Moscow we had such an opportunity, but there were only 3 phases worked. So every day phase, then the night phase, and that intermediary phase where we had only yellow light. And we're in for something future. On my next slide, we try to represent the technologies which exist in the world and where our colleagues have experience. Driverless or pilotless car is now discussed a lot, and we have tests, which is buses. These buses are to use the existing transport network to cut the limits, not to have accidents, and so that the transport could cover the whole network. Speed transport is another interesting area. It is not city transport. It is mostly relevant for railroads. And we have this railway line between Moscow and St. Petersburg, where the train Sapsans go, and these are the high-speed trains, but this is not really a city transport system. Driverless metro or pilotless metro. Well, as I've said already, there are techniques and there is experience in Paris and London, and we went to Paris. And we saw this underground line where there are no drivers, but they have 3-minute intervals, which is absolutely impossible for Moscow because the interval of metro trains in Moscow is only 90 seconds and no more. And so today we cannot make driverless trains with such little intervals. Automatic management and driverless trains is impossible in Moscow today, but I'm absolutely sure that in the near future we'll have new opportunities and we'll be able to have the intervals less than 90 minutes. But this is even not for our program up to 2020, but after 2020. So we're moving towards this kind of development, but today we don't want to implement it because it will impair the whole situation for Muscovites. So, well, automatic regulation of transport in Moscow with use of big data. And this is where we are one of the tops in Moscow. I went to several cities, including Tokyo and London, and we saw how this kind of systems work there. Our colleagues started about 10 years ago. For instance, in Tokyo, this system worked already 10 years ago. But today, the whole technology develops so rapidly that we are leaders now, not because we were the best, but we managed to implicate the systems which are the best. We use the experience of our partners in Tokyo, for instance, and that is why our system is better, it is more mobile, and it is based on the experience and the problems and hindrances our colleagues have already faced. That is why we can see the transport in real time. We have a lot of lights. We're at the tops there too. We have the information boards which can show the loads, the jams, and they even forecast how much time you will have to spend to get to this or that point in the city. And this is also the way to transfer some information to our people. This can be both positive information, negative too. For instance, yesterday, a girl disappeared while the parents couldn't find her, and the police asked us to place the data and the picture of that girl for better reaction of the Muscovites. The police did manage to find that girl, maybe not only thanks to that placement, but we are ready for this kind of information placement too. So, going on, I can see that we can do a lot to increase speeds, to combat traffic jams, and to do so that our public transport is of high priority. Well, we are advocates for eco-friendly, convenient, and rapid transport. Unfortunately, we don't have nationally produced analogs we could test for pilot programs. We don't have driverless cars, no pilot car, but we need this kind of cars and buses, and we are ready to work together with our Moscow city government and to fund money so that our great city Moscow has the best transport of the most speedy and with the best quality. So as soon as we have a product like this, we are ready to have any kind of long-term contract for 5 years, for instance, for this kind of modern bus or any kind of other transport. Another important point is price. But taxi, car sharing now is popular. I wouldn't say that technologically it is not. It is a breakaway, but still. Originally, just we're used to use our own private cars. And now, psychologically, we've turned our mentality so that we're getting more and more used to using taxis or car sharing. This used to be a problem of Muscovites, maybe, and this should be changed, I believe, so that our transportation system is unified and centralized. These are the basic points I wanted to cover, and my next slide concludes this issue. So what do we believe in? We, the Moscow city government and the transport department. So number one is the big data for automatic regulation, navigation of the transport. This is what we have already. So we can analyze the data so that we have a unified system of a person, a car, and the public transport. Imagine there is some problem about the train, which comes late to the Kiev railway station. We can automatically do so that the bus waiting for those people coming from this train can also wait for the passengers. So the metro is the only system which works all the time. We don't need to control the timetable because we have trains every 90 seconds. But we believe that in the coming 2 or 3 years we'll have this system of unified transport, that the system will penetrate everywhere. Electrical transport. This is what we also believe in. The breakaway techniques, which are not sometimes something we imagine. Sometimes we think of some dramatical change in the transportation systems, but I think we'll have something like that. More bicycles, more taxis, more car share systems will be used so that our people mentally will perceive and use this kind of systems more. Hyperloop is a great system. It is not the city transport, but it can also be integrated in the whole city system. And thanks to that, we'll see what we want to see in our city of future. Thank you very much.
Now I'd like to invite Chris Vasquez on the stage, who will speak about the nearest future transport in terms of the city scale and country scale, maybe Hyperloop one of the most buzz project.
Me here today. I like this forum a little bit better than the previous ones, more informal. this is going to have to be a conversation that we have with the places that need this technology, that want this technology, to make sure that we are giving you exactly what you want. So you understand exactly what we are, and you know how best to use this. I think at the end of the day, what we look to be is a tool that leverages the energy that is the people of any country, of any city, because that is really what this is all about. And I'm excited to hear all this talk about people-centric design and people-centric planning, because at the end of the day, that is what this is all about. So what we're really trying to do is bring people closer together so that they can accomplish things in ways that we never envisioned before.
Thank you, Chris. Chris остается здесь в зале.
Chris will stay in the room. I'm sure you'll have questions. Everybody is talking right now about, and I'm sure that you have a lot of questions. He will speak about the car of the future, what will be the fuel, how it will be steered.
Share fear of stage. So I promised her before every speech to take a picture of the audience and show her how not scary it is. It took us around 350 years from the moment we invented the telescope until we put a man in space. But it took us, it's not working, it's not working. This? But it took us only 15 years from the moment MRI came to life to connect our brain to a computer. And it's important because we live in a world that when I put a sentence like that on the board, all of us understand it. It's very simple. 5 years from now, everything is questionable except the word I. Because what is download? What is an install? What is a smartphone? What is an app? And what is a car? What is a computer? It's interesting to see that, this device that we call a car is the most sophisticated computing device we have as human beings that we're actually able to sit in, and we're getting shit in return. Because the dashboard looks at us, we look at the road, and we're stuck in traffic jam. The return on investment for this device is the worst return on investment we have on any other toy that we buy. Because where is our cars now? Where is our cars 95% of the time? Parking in a traffic. And these technologies enable us to reach outside of the car and literally reimagine the cities. And it's full of buzzwords today. Dubai is going to be autonomous driving until 2030. And I run these jokes with my kids that we have autonomous driving cars today. And my kids, wait, but that means the car will never hit us. No, it will never hit you. It will never hit you. So how far before my kids will jump in front of autonomous driving cars on the road and we create an autonomous driving traffic jams? Now you drive, now you stop. Because this is how we program cars, not to hit anyone. And it's running on an infrastructure that is literally not support that. But what if the future of our mobility is actually not anchored in physical needs, but in digital ones? What if... See, the slides are not for you. It's actually for me to remember what I need to say next, and when it doesn't work, it simply doesn't work. What if, we talked about the transportations of goods. What if we can get, our pizza delivered or our shoes delivered 30 minutes from the minute we bought them through, a Skype founder company? What if we get stuck on the 405 and get hot pasta delivered to my car through an Amazon drone? What if I can manifest my existence and immerse myself in a digital landscape and travel without moving? In the end of the day, I think Elon Musk said we are living in a hologram. What if we are living in a hologram? What if technologies like the void in Utah will enable us to travel from one place to another? And it's all happened in the city. And remember, the city is the oldest social, political, economic zone we had. Nations came way after that. And when Sir Joseph Williams designed the sewage system in London, he insisted to design it to have the 5 or 6 times the capacity. And everyone laughed at him, but if he wouldn't have done that, London would literally have been drowning in shit right now. Not the political shit, but real shit. And this is the infrastructure. We are anchored to 18th, 19th century infrastructure. And we talked about space, and this fantastic device that we build to launch a man to space. And it has, everything is calculated on the distance between the boosters that are lifting that device. And the distance between the boosters is calculated based on the tunnel that they're actually leading the boosters to the launch pad. And in that tunnel, the tunnel was built around rails. And the distance between the rails is the exact same distance of the railroads we had in the UK so many years ago. And where did we put railroad in the UK? Exactly where the Romans used to ride horse and carriage. And the roads was based on the distance between the wheels of a horse of carriage. That basically, see, now you're destroying my joke. Based on the distance between 2 horses' asses. Every chassis you see of a car today is based on the distance between 2 horses' asses. And my simple question is, how do we scale that to the next level? So cities like Stockholm are trying to retrofit reality in order to better accommodate the need of the infrastructure. I love the new traffic lights in Hamburg. The traffic lights are not up there, they're here because we're working with mobile phones all the time and we're looking down. So this is how we are retrofitting the city. And I love how now I have to say something about Tesla. It's a genius idea. Let's push the pollution to someone else, right? But that's what we are doing. That's the entire issue with electric cars. Let's push the solution to someone else. And let's talk about, does anyone here know what is the ampere you get from an outlet in Moscow? How much ampere you get from the wall when you want to charge your electric car? So in Sweden, for example, we're talking about 12 to 16 ampere, which you cannot have a Tesla because it needs 25 amperes. So Tesla is coming in and helping to people to rebuild their outlets. Norway has 24 amperes. But we can talk about these things while real life is actually escaping the labs and starting to interact with the real infrastructure in the city. While that happened, Google already left autonomous driving cars, Sergey Brin at least, and started to look about flying cars. And whenever I talk about flying cars, people say, that's a dream, but you can actually buy a flying car in California today. 10 hours, driver license as an ultralight, it's autonomous, it's flying itself. And Nevada finally allowed passenger drone testing. We are creating a world that has a set of intangible assets all around us. I will not, in one of my talks, I'm talking about how we are miscalculating GDP, and we are never including the potential of digital technologies. But AR and VR creating this wonderful ecology of connected identities, and they're helping us define better the relationship of our organic matter with our digital counterpart. And again, my kids' kids will be born in a world that social mobility creates all the difference between those who live in the physical world and those who live in the digital landscape. And this new model needs to look at data. People say data is the new oil. I said, no, data is not the new oil. Oil is oil. Data is the new supply chain, which we need to build our infrastructure on. And it's places in Africa, in South America, that they have nothing for infrastructure that enable to raise these alpha cities, cities that mobility, energy, and communications are intertwined with each other and coexist with each other in order to deliver what is needed. Look at Moscow. Take a hybrid view. You will realize that 75% of your city is traffic lots and roads. 75%. Most people are moving to live in an urban city. How many more people can Moscow take right now? Can you accommodate 3 million more people? Hydroloop is a great solution between cities. How are we solving transportations in the cities? Maybe by reimagining life itself in the city. And that's it. I think 8 minutes I succeeded to fold it. I'm finished, you can ask questions.
Okay, thank you for this presentation. And
Yeah, you can clap.
Any questions?
That means everyone's in shock.
я предоставляю
Now I would like to give floor to Dmitry Snesser, head of the client department of the VTB Bank. I am just a modest banker, and it's really difficult for me to speak about the bright future. When I was a small kid, I first went to Moscow. I amused myself by throwing 5 kopecks coins to the metro, down to the metro. So how banks will influence modern megalopolis transport. If we look at the evolution over time, we'll see that we're more or less keeping the pace of the overall development. If you look at how we're paying for the metro, this system evolved, and so did we. So who has the Troika card? So Troika card is the next evolution step, and how many of you use the mobile application for the Troika card? Then the marketing was quite bad. Well, there is a great application called My Travel Pass. So if you're the lucky owner of a Windows smartphone or an Android smartphone, you can just top up this card via your phone. So you just buy the card, link it to the application, and you top up your card digitally. The future still would be the smartphone itself. During the previous session, the tax minister said that today the younger generation does nothing without a smartphone, but I'm 44 and I'm also quite an active user of a smartphone. I have Uber and Get Taxi applications, my travel pass as well. So paying metro with smartphones would be the next step, and we're developing a system that would allow to use metro with paying with your smartphone. You just use your smartphone, you approach it to the turnstile, and you go on. So we just need to change the regulation, and I think in the next 6 to 8 months we'll launch this system. VTB and the Bank of Moscow has launched a pilot project with 23 turnstiles where you can use contactless payment method with a contactless bank card. I think that in the nearest future we will use that all over the Moscow metro system. So the progress is going is advancing, and we're advancing with this progress, and I hope that banks would not be an obstacle that would stop or somehow impede this progress. The only issue here maybe would be whether these new technologies are going to somehow cut the market share of the banks. Well, of course, there are such technologies, but I don't see any major threat to the banks. Banks will always be banks if the regulator and the client want that. So, in other words, I can't understand why Expedia or Amazon have not launched their own banking institution, because they have all the information they need. They have all the credit history. I've been using 16 years both services, but none of these companies are launching such a service. And I think that's a fortunate fact, because I would not be a Wall-E character, Wall-E cartoon character, because you remember there was this one single corporation that supplied everything. As a user, I'm against that. We have the, of course, confidentiality issue in our century of technologies and devices. Confidentiality is maybe secondary, because Uber knows where I go, Amazon knows what I bought, but I would still like to have this division between service providers and banks. I think that's important. In terms of the transportation, we're glad that Moscow keeps the pace or even ahead of some other cities, and will support Moscow. Thank you. Thank you, Dmitry. And the last presentation.
Eric Tau.
So there is a person who is working in a very interesting institution for IT solutions, and his name is Anthony Townsend, and he will tell us something interesting. Good afternoon.
The smartest part of the smart city today. That's because it's the most heavily dominated by engineering. It's the area of the city that's seen the least innovation in the last 50 to 100 years. Look at your subway system. It's 100 years old, same technology, same business model, same governance and regulation. Your bus system is 200 years old, although we got rid of the horses and replaced them with an internal combustion engine about a century ago. Your road system is about 50 to 75 years old. That's all changing very quickly thanks to digital technology, thanks to private sector, and thanks to consumers who are finally finding other places to buy their mobility services from. So about 2 years ago, I undertook a study funded by the Rockefeller Foundation that looked 20 years out in the United States, although these, the findings I think were relevant to cities all around the world, trying to understand what's going on, because it's not just one technology, it's dozens of technologies, hardware, software, networks, artificial intelligence, data, algorithms, just, it's coming at us from all directions, but also business models enabled by those technologies, and then all the impacts of those technologies on land use, on payments, on financing schemes, the way regulations are adopted and enforced. This is called Reprogramming Mobility. The studies are there. We developed 4 different scenarios looking at 4 different possible futures in 4 different metropolitan areas in the United States. And we illustrated some of these futures using these cartoon-like diagrams. This is just a sample here. And the idea really was that the future is a work in progress. The future is provisional. It's still being determined, but we can at least start to sketch it and start to understand what's possible. And this was really a challenge to try to provoke a conversation about how are government institutions going to respond to this. We looked at what was happening with Uber and local regulators and said to ourselves, this is just the first battle in what is a long series of battles, a war between local governments, transport regulators and policymakers, and industry that is just starting. In fact, we will look back on this and wish it was this easy in the future because the challenges that are coming. And really what it showed was a complete lack of foresight in the public sector about what's possible and the trade-offs that will be. And really a lack of institutional capacity to see what's coming. So we want to get ahead of that. If you really wanted to stretch the analogy, you could say it's basically 1925. And we've seen this great new technology that's coming to our cities, the automobile. We're imagining the possibilities. The people that are creating it are telling us what's possible. And we're just kind of ignoring all the risks that it presents. We're ignoring all the great things we could do if we structured the path it will evolve in. And we're essentially letting them make the decisions for us. So what this study tried to do was look at every segment of the value chain in the transportation system and understand how is technology having an impact. I'm just going to give you a flavor of some of the things we were looking at. So vehicles, how is the IT industry reprogramming vehicles? We heard from the Hyperloop group. There's tons of stuff going on there. You look at things like skateboards. People are building electric skateboards that you can't fall off of. One Wheel in San Francisco. This is the most fun thing you will ever do in your life. I encourage you to buy it. It's basically the hoverboard from Back to the Future. The Google car, of course, and then Lit Motors, another San Francisco startup. This is a motorcycle that doesn't tip over. And this company has since failed. It was a venture-funded company, but this is basically the same technology behind the Segway. It's a gyroscopically stabilized motorcycle, and it's electric powered. What's really remarkable about it, which you'll see in a second, is that unlike most motorcycles, which if you get hit by a car, tip over and spill the rider and kill you, this motorcycle can get hit at full speed from the side, and it will stay upright, allowing the rider to step out and walk away. So this is a completely new thing enabled by smart technology. Buses, I talked a little bit about buses earlier. If anybody wants to corner me later, I can talk lots more about buses. This is Istanbul. I was just in Buenos Aires, spent a lot of time in both cities this year. Both cities are in the midst of being completely transformed by the introduction of bus rapid transit. They're not spending money on metros, and they're spending it on buses, and they're doing it incredibly quickly and getting a lot of the benefits of building metros, but doing it with buses. And they're going to be able to deploy technologies cheaply and quickly through bus networks. And when automation comes along, autonomous driving, they'll be able to add that as well. My favorite thing about Buenos Aires, my favorite bus story, is that there's basically a transit strike every day, or at least every week for the Buenos Aires metro system. And they block the buses as well when they strike, the striking crowds. But they part the crowd to let the express buses through. That's how much they love the express buses. They don't stop the protests for anything else but to let the express buses through. It's a remarkable thing. I showed these this morning. Elon Musk, coyly, in addition to talking about the Hyperloop, has let out hints that Tesla's working on one of these small 8 to 12 person shared autonomous vehicles. So vehicles, lots of innovation. Infrastructure, another part of the value chain. There's a tremendous amount of innovation spending going on in city governments around the world. This is New York's smart programmable system. Companies like Uber, one way of seeing what Uber's doing is reprogramming markets. In one fell swoop, introducing dynamic pricing, matching supply and demand. Don't ever try to catch an Uber on New Year's Eve in New York City after the ball comes down, because you'll pay 7 times the usual fare. We're reprogramming people. Rideshare services like Lyftline are getting people to share taxis with strangers. I'll finish in a minute. New Yorkers would never share a taxi with a stranger, but you give them a phone and the phone tells them to do it, and they'll do it. it gives them the trust that they need. We're also reprogramming ourselves. So price, it turns out, time are not the only things that make us choose when we want to travel and how we want to travel. We also care about carbon output. We also care about personal health. And there are apps that will let you look at all these factors and pick, for any given trip, what's the most important thing to me right now? Is it saving money, saving time, burning calories and staying healthy, or reducing carbon output? Reprogramming places, urban designers and architects are finally starting to understand that I can make a building better if I put a sign in the lobby that shows when the trains and buses are coming. It connects the building into the infrastructure and makes the building a piece of the mobility system in a way that it hasn't really been until now. It's also incredibly useful in making the building more resilient during crisis, allowing the building to be evacuated, to be hardened against disasters, whether they're human or man-made. Let's see, and then I think one of the most interesting things are the do-it-yourself projects. So we've heard a lot about open data, open transit data, the things that people build. This is one of my favorites, PyPal. This was built in Washington, D.C. This plugs into Domino's Pizza, and it's basically a button that when you dial the number of pizzas you want and press a button, it talks to Domino's API on the web, and about 15 minutes later, a person shows up with pizzas wherever this box is. This is the Internet of Things in action. This is another app called Dorothy, which talks to Uber's API on the web. If you remember from The Wizard of Oz at the end when Dorothy clicks her heels, the ruby slippers, 3 times, and she goes home to Kansas, this is the ruby slippers for the digital age. When you open this box and you click it 3 times, an Uber comes and gets you and takes you home from whatever nightclub you've been drinking at all night. This was built by a person like me. I'm actually building something like this. This is my desk at home. I'm building a sign for the trolley in my neighborhood in New Jersey that tells me, and my daughter, and we're building this together, my 8-year-old daughter, in Python, using open transit data, and an $80 sign made in China that shows us when the train is coming. So this isn't just for governments and engineers, this is for citizens to build as well. So this is all happening, it's happening quickly. But the thing is, this is a world that's stopping and starting in all kinds of different speeds. There's a lot of change going on. Singapore's electronic road pricing, often hailed as the smartest smart transport project in the world. This is a digital upgrade that happened 10 years ago at least, maybe 15. It was a digital upgrade for a paper-based system that started in the 60s. It was a World Bank-funded project, right? So there's really no overnight successes in the smart city, even in transport. Long time in the making. The truth, though, is that there are, right? When the money and the will and the freedom from politics comes, Uber went in and basically recruited away the entire robotics faculty from Carnegie Mellon in Pittsburgh in the United States, all of whom had previously been working on Pentagon-sponsored research. So instead of making autonomous vehicles for the US military, they're now making autonomous taxis for Uber. Literally, in the span of like one day, that happened. So very strange times, a lot of innovation, a lot of fast change, and a lot of unexpected things happening. So enjoy it. We're all going to benefit from it, but it's going to be a wild ride. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. И завершает нашу такую маленькую сессию.
And to finalize this session, the last but not the least, Nikolai Saul, Minister of Transport of the Russian Federation, will speak. Let me speak. I am not the minister, but the deputy minister. But still, I'm responsible for urban transport and urban transportation system. That is why it's very interesting for me to listen to you today. I wasn't preparing any kind of presentation. I just wanted to listen to you, and now I just want to remark that here we have different interesting technologies. Uber is a great idea. It is not a new idea, but now we have a practical phase, testing phase, and this is great. And if Happy Loop can combine different kinds of transport, tracks and passenger transport, there are very often conflicts between these two transportation systems. If they manage it, then we'll benefit, all of us. We met the chiefs of the company, and they support introduction of these new technologies and Hyperloop to connect different cities, mega cities and megapolises. Moscow and other competitor and other cities, so that this system makes different transport systems not competitors but part of one system. And IT solutions today is of paramount importance. The majority of our citizens do use mobile application, and this should be taken into consideration. Taxi applications and other systems, they should be regulated. Some taxi company openers tell us to stick to the old-fashioned ideas, but we understand that this is impossible. This is a market which develops, and it is of great demand. Safety and security issues are also core, because only using these applications and systems we can control safety and security. Some medical issues, imagine a driver doesn't feel well, for instance. So we want this kind of partners who do not only want money and IT for IT, but safety and security for our people, both passengers and drivers. Urban forum is highly precious. Why? Many regions of the Russian Federation can go here and see their partners from Moscow, from other countries, and we use and share the experience. Several years ago, Moscow City Mayor office applied to us for private parking places and for mobile applications for that. So this is what we're doing today. And the statistic is that customers use mobile apps than parkomats, the machines. My colleague remembers 5 kopeck coin we used to pay in metro. This is part of the history, but even today, many cities and towns still use some kind of coins or other kind of jetons. Sometimes you can pay through your application, but sometimes you can plan it. And then you go to and fro, and the system works so that it helps you when how to change a tram to a metro. And the system, GLONASS based, can see you and assist you all the time. This is what I see as part of very, very near future. Thank you for a very interesting session. And we'll use the information of today on the level of Moscow City. We prepared a law, a draft, regulating not only paid roads, but it also is called transport system management, and this gives a lot of solutions. It can limit some ecological parameters, for instance, not allowing transportation means with the CO2 emission to enter the city. So this law, if we have now it's a draft, will regulate a lot of things. So we are now on the way for the cities to have great powers to regulate their own transport system. And I would like to help the organizers of the forum for the superb organization showed here. So here, not only technologies, but ideas are represented to improve our cities and improve our life. Thank you very much, my dear friends. Now I'd like to declare the session closed. We tried to be very rapid, and that is why the speakers are still here. So